Hello, everyone. My name is Gus.
Hi, I'm Woody.
This week we have another video based on scuba. We're continuing this trend from last week because 2 weeks ago we posted a video where we talk about ancient civilizations living in caves or something, and people said, guys, stick to scuba. You have no credentials to be talking about these topics. And you say you wanted to address that.
Yeah,
they tell you to don't bring it up. All this stuff about
If you don't have the sort of the credentials or the training for that, maybe you shouldn't be saying the things I said. But
you told me you're a trained professional.
I have a black card.
And you were gonna show me.
You have a black card?
Like a credit card? Okay, that's
no. I mean, I'm not just saying these things.
God.
I'm not
Dude,
just saying these.
That's his clergy. What do you?
Yeah, I am. I'm not just joking. I'm trained. So all of the things I said 2 weeks ago, for those that said, you're Woody, you don't know what you're talking about, you're closed-minded. And there's one other thing that I wanted to tell you about.
Universal Life Church. What is that? That's some made-up. What is this?
I'm clergy. So now, because of this, because I sense at times that, like a couple weeks ago, you may have disrespected me a little. I sense it. So now, from now on, to you, I'm not Woody. I am Rabbi Woody.
Okay.
It's just easy. Just start every sentence with Rabbi, and I'll be like, yes.
To the 4 people that haven't clicked out of this video already, we haven't even started. This video was a recommendation as well. This one is about diving, which we're both trained professionals. So unlike you, I'm not clergy. Right?
I mean, that's your fault. You
can
get the training. It takes a while.
That's okay.
I'm going to wear it just so you remember.
But we are both trained professionals in scuba, and we both happen to be scuba instructors as well. This video, it's allegedly about an instructor who killed one of his students. I don't know all the details. I haven't watched this video. I hope it's good. But let's give it a shot. Ready?
Let's do it.
On Sunday, July 24th, 2016, dive instructor Nigel Craig began a deep specialty course dive for a student, Richard Stansfield. Tragically, it would be Richard's final dive. They were entering the depths of a disused flooded quarry in Leicestershire, UK, a popular dive training site. But the events that would follow would be the beginning of a hellish chapter in Nigel's life as he was prosecuted for his student's death.
All right, hold on. Let's stop right here for a second. Let's read some of these. Yeah.
Thank you.
So the top one says, scuba diver, I know your face is blocking it. I'll read it. Scuba diver died after instructor held him underwater for a safety stub. Okay, so we'll talk about safety stops in a second. Accused a dive instructor's wrongful prosecution for manslaughter. Instructor charging death of student he pulled over for safety stub. Hung jury discharged in Stony manslaughter trial.
Wow, so it's a hung jury, so they could not decide, that means.
So I think, based on this, apparently the instructor held the student down to force a safety stop. But how did the student die during a safety stop close to the surface? We're about to find out.
But it is
interesting.
But
before we go into that, talk about safety stops.
Yeah, I'll talk about safety stops, and I'll talk about the hung jury. It is interesting.
Why are you still holding that card?
Whatever, just in case you ever lose a moment of respect, I'm going to remind you I have a black card.
Okay.
What was I saying? Yeah, hung jury. So some people in this jury believe whatever he was accused of happened.
Okay.
But a safety stop is... the word really describes it. It's an extra layer of cushion. Somewhere between 15 feet and 20 feet. There's a zone.
5 to 6 meters, yeah.
On the way up. Imagine we just stop. And we wait 3 minutes. And your computer, your dive computer, it automatically starts a countdown when you hit 20 feet. And it starts counting down. Most of them count down.
Yeah.
And then it finishes, and then you can go to the surface. Now, a safety stop, the reason why it's safety is you don't have to make a safety stop.
Right.
The algorithms or the formulas that write the deco profiles basically say if you're in the no decompression limits of a dive, in other words, wherever you were on the dive, you never stayed at that depth beyond what the computer told you to stay in these no deco limits. That means you could go to the surface at any point in the dive.
Yeah.
But we add even more
safety.
That's
why it's called safety.
We stop for 3 minutes. Typically, they're 3 minutes.
Yep.
Between 15 and 20 feet. Gets even more nitrogen out of our blood.
Yep.
So that our frankly, what it does is it's lowering your gradient factor. It's lowering how close you are to that M value, to the maximum level of saturation that we know the 16 departments can take. It even lowers that so you come up with less nitrogen. That's a long-winded way of explaining it for you non-divers.
Yeah. And like you said, usually it's 3 minutes because it depends. If you're doing a deeper dive, I've noticed that some computers will suggest you do a 5-minute stop, for example. And some agencies even have their own best practices, like Inner Space Explorers, for example. They believe on a 3 stop, which is a 9, 6, and 3 meters. So you do 1 minute at 9, so let's say 30 feet. 1 minute at 30 feet, then 2 minutes at 20 feet, then 3 minutes at 10 feet. So you do 1, 2, 3 at those depths to extra safety, to add extra safety. But like you said, it's a safety stop just for extra safety. As long as you stay within the no decompression limit, which every newly certified diver will be taught to dive to those limits, then you could go to the surface without stopping for safety.
Yes, and one more important thing. You said I would like you to explain it. I just want to remind you of how to start. My name is Rabbi.
Let's see what happened with Nigel and his student.
This case led to medical discoveries that would change dive training forever. This is their story.
It's weird that it changed dive training forever. I haven't heard of it.
I haven't either.
Let's see how it changed diving forever.
Stony Cove has a long history of being a popular dive training site, stemming from beginners to deep specialty dives.
Cool, by the way.
For good reason.
And cold.
The massive flooded quarry is easy to access and has several shelves of different depths, ranging from 7 meters to 35 meters at its deepest point.
Nice.
Its location, history, and depth make it the perfect training location. This is a place that Nigel Craig was intimately familiar with. Nigel himself had learned how to dive in Stony Cove in 1996, and after 20 years, he was now an instructor there. Over the years, he had completed hundreds of dives as both a diver and instructor for his local dive center, Dive Northampton. Nigel was a true veteran of the
inquiries
Corps
are never
and
that
knew
clear.
every inch of its terrain. So when Richard Stansfield, a 40-year-old advanced open water certified diver, approached Nigel to become a certified deep diver, things were quickly put into motion. To earn his certification, Richard would have to complete 3 separate dives with an instructor. The first was already completed during his open water certification.
We should just add that if he's getting a deep diver certification, a lot of people aren't going to know what that means. It just means now you are certified to dive to 130 feet is the normal amount that you can get
40 meters
to when you get this certification. And it's going to teach you additional procedures. Particularly dive planning becomes more important because you're breathing that air very fast compared to the surface. And you may also have emergency deco stops. You're going to have to learn about that on the way up, right? Because you may exceed. And you're also probably going to have a deep stop. So your computer is now typically going to add another stop beyond the safety stop.
Just for safety. But before you move on, so when you get certified, for those of you who are thinking about getting certified or who may not know about this, the certification level, I think it may depend on the agency, but it's typically to 20 meters, like 66 feet. They tell you, like, stay pretty shallow, 20 meters, don't go beyond that until you get more experience, and then you can push it to 30 meters or 100 feet, and then eventually get trained to go to 40. But that is what we call the recreational diving depths, where we can go to those depths, especially deeper, like to 40 meters, 132 feet. You start getting the effects of narcosis. You start noticing that gas is thicker. It's like syrupy. I don't know how to explain it when you breathe it. And you know, people when they go deep, like I remember the first person I took to like pass 100 feet, 30 meters, they were like a little panicked, like, oh, this feels weird because the air is thicker. It's like, you know, multiple times thicker than on the surface. So it feels a little odd. Luckily, the deeper you go, the shorter your NDL is, or your no decompression limit is. So you're only spending a couple minutes at those depths before you have to head up, or else you're going to start getting into decompression and technical diving. But there is no, like, it's always interesting when I hear people talking about deep diving certifications to 40 meters, because sometimes we do dives where our stops are deeper than the deepest
Yeah.
deep diver certification. So,
Yes.
and, you've been deeper than me to 100 meters plus. My deepest is 90. So these certifications are, again, geared towards recreational divers. So 40 meters, no decompression, just air, keeping it simple. And yeah, like you said, there's some new skills that you learn. And also, I think to me, when I took the class, I still remember one of the things is the mindset. Like, here's what's going to happen to your body when you're at 40 meters. You're going to experience this and that. It prepares you mentally to expect it.
And
Perfect.
a second dive would be scheduled for Sunday, July 24th, 2016, at Stony Cove. The course's purpose is to better help divers understand the effects of pressure at depth, how increased air consumption and nitrogen loading necessitate shorter dive times, how narcosis can affect diver judgment, and the importance of making safety stops.
Everything
Wow.
I
to
said,
the
but better.
potential for
But he said it better.
decompression
Yeah.
sickness. For those of you that have watched my previous diving or cave diving videos,
Wait a
all
minute.
of these topics are reoccurring factors.
Look
in
at all
things
these.
going
We
wrong
haven't reacted
under the
to them.
water. When arriving at Stony Cove, you pull your car up to a small parking lot, unload your gear, and walk down a small staircase right next to the bank of the water before walking another 100 yards or so to the first entrance.
very detailed,
into
this
the
guy.
water. It is a small staircase surrounded by an old metal guardrail with 2 or 3 steps above water before disappearing into the depths. The plan on July 24th was to follow this exact route where Nigel Craig, his dive partner Carol Tokarczyk, and Richard Stansfield would enter the water while putting on their gear. They would then have a short briefing and safety check before making a 100-meter swim to a descent line, marking an area in the cove that led to the hyperbox at a depth of 35 meters. The metal structure used for commercial dive training, and recreational instructors used it for deep dives. After reaching the depth, they would then ascend back to 5 meters, where they would make a mandatory 3-minute safety stop before surface.
Well, it depends on the time, like you mentioned. They could have other stops. But I just wanted to add this level of clarity, and most people don't really care that much, but it just came to my head, is why if the certification is to 40 meters, why are they going to a place that is only 35? Like, why go to 115 feet, which is about 35 meters, rather than the full 130? And the reason is, and again, this may be depending on the agency, you are doing 3 dives as part of your training. One is 60 to 80 feet, so 20 meters to whatever, 25, 26, something like that. And then you do another dive between 80 and 100, so 25 meters to 30. And then your final dive is between 100 and 130. So your deepest dive is the final dive, which is what they're doing. 35 being 115 feet is right within the standard. So far, you don't have to go all the way to 40 to get certified as a deep diver. If you have 35 meters, that's still fine. It's within the standard, so nothing wrong so far.
Now, this is important, as it will later come back in the story.
Except that
After
hood.
going over
That
the
was
plan one
terrible.
final time, the trio would begin their surface
it's
swim
orange.
out to the dive line. And after reaching the correct area, they would wait a few minutes on the surface for Richard to catch his breath. Once he was ready, the trio would put their regulators into their mouths and begin the descent.
My God,
it took
so detailed.
approximately 10 minutes to reach the dive's maximum depth of 32 meters. Normally, this is a faster process, but during the descent, Richard had trouble with his buoyancy. After reaching the bottom of the quarry, Nigel would complete an air check. This is where he noticed that Richard had 150 bars remaining in his 12-liter cylinder. For perspective, Richard had started the dive with 250.
And that's
Wow.
another thing we didn't mention.
Yeah.
And it takes some work. He mentioned it. Trouble with his buoyancy. The deeper you go, the more compressed your wetsuit is or your dry suit, the more compressed your air is. So you've got to adjust your buoyancy
Yep.
on the way down. Now, here's what's interesting, though. The deeper you go, the less amount of adjustments needed. It's opposite of what you think, because each atmosphere is 1/2 less the pressure of the previous atmosphere.
Correct.
So the first 33 feet is the most adjustment you need
Right.
in your BCD. You have to add the most air
Yeah.
to stabilize and make you neutral. That second atmosphere below it, or it's actually the third atmosphere,
Yeah.
right? Between 33 and
33 to
60,
66, yeah.
1/2 the pressure change of that previous atmosphere. So
Yeah.
much less adjustment. So they get littler and littler as you go down.
Yeah.
Same with that on the way up, right? You're going to let out less air on the deeper atmospheres, and then you start hitting the upper atmospheres, and man, you can start really feeling yourself fly. So you got to let out more air than you do on the previous. So you have to learn those adjustments and learn those subtleties by feel, mainly by feel.
And this sounds complicated.
Takes a minute.
It takes a minute. It sounds complicated, but once you start diving, you don't even think about it. You just reach for it, dump.
Exactly.
Or whatever dump
Feel
valve you
yourself.
use.
Oh, I'm getting pushed up a little bit faster. Let out a little more.
Drop.
It becomes natural.
Now, this wasn't a crisis moment, mainly because Richard and his partner Carol each had an extra 12-liter canister of air, but it certainly perked Nigel's eyebrows. He made a mental note to double-check Richard's air supplies in a few minutes, but first they were going to complete a navigation exercise. During this exercise, Richard was struggling with his buoyancy. His body was slowly floating towards the surface, and he continuously had to adjust to keep himself submerged with the other two divers. Nigel cut the exercise short to repeat the test, and during the second attempt, Richard would pass with flying colors. This is when Nigel would check Richard's air supply for a second time, and he would receive a signal for 60 bars. This was much less than Nigel expected based on his earlier check.
So 60 bar, for those of you who work in PSI, is about 1,000 PSI, a little bit less than 1,000. So
he ought to be coming up, right? Because if he's used typically he's used
correct.
2/3
That's what I was
of
going
his
to
air.
say. And for those of you who don't know what PSIs or bar are, that's about 1/3 left of the air in his tank.
We typically plan in recreational diving to use about 1/3 of your air for the descent and for your bottom time.
Yep.
Another third of your air to start working your way back up to the safety stop, and you want to come back on the boat with typically about 500 psi, so a little bit less than a third of your tank is left.
Yeah.
That's standard.
And I know that there's people that watch this that are divers and they're like, that's dumb. I never do that. And I've heard this conversation before on boats where people go like, I pay for the whole tank. I'm going to use the whole tank. You know, it's stuff like that. The challenge is what happens if your body runs out of air at the worst possible time? Yeah. If you follow the best practices that Woody was mentioned, which are safety best practices, then that means you go down, you're at depth, and right at the second you decide we're done, we need to go up, your body's tank stops working. Maybe it's not out of air, but let's say the first stage on his regulator breaks or whatever. Now you have 2/3 to get both of you back to the surface. That's why you leave those 2/3 there. It's not just for you. If you just think about yourself, then I agree with you saying like, why do I need 2/3 to get to the surface if I only use 1/3 to get down here? But it's not just you. It's you and your body. Now you don't have 2/3. Now you have 2/3 for two people. And your body just ran out of air. Their heart rate is going. Their breathing rate is going. So you have 2/3. You just use 1/3, calm, going down, excited about the dive, not hyperventilating, and now you're sharing air with somebody who is. And perhaps you are now getting worried because, man, this guy's going through all my air like so fast, and let's go up. Like you're both now breathing fast. That's why we leave 2/3 for emergencies. In this case, this guy just finished an exercise at depth, and he has less than 1/3 left. He started with 250 bar, if we believe the video is accurate, and he has 60. I don't know. What is it? Like 1/3 of 250 is about 833, I would say. He has 600, so he's less than 1/3, and he hasn't even started going up. That's not good.
Yep.
So he immediately signaled for the dive to end and begin the ascent. On the way up, he would signal for Carol to continue to check Richard's air supply, and at 18 meters, Richard would indicate that he was out of air, even though Carol saw that there were 20 bars left in his tank. Nigel would later state, there was no indication of any heavy breathing, no sign of panic, nothing like that. So I decided to swap him onto Carol's alternate. After getting reassurance from Richard, now that he was breathing from Carol's alternate tank, the group would continue to ascend, but once again, Richard would soon signal that he was out of air. At this point, Nigel was confused. Carol had purged the regulator and everything was working fine, yet Richard could not breathe.
But you're
Carol
the
would
instructor.
make the decision to put him on his own tank. They locked eyes, and Carol gave the calm down signal. Richard would give the okay, and they would carry on. As they approached the final 5 meters, Nigel thought that it was still prudent to make the 3-minute safety stop, as Richard was calm and there was still plenty of air. 2 minutes into the safety stop, issues would begin again. Richard, out of nowhere, would panic and try to bolt for the surface, but Nigel would quickly reach out and grab him, trying to prevent him from making an unsafe ascent. In the confusion, Richard's regulator would be pulled from his mouth. Nigel would later state that he didn't understand why Richard was saying he's got no air when he does. Everything was working just fine, yet Richard couldn't breathe. Nigel would look up at Richard's eyes and they would glaze over. That's when he noticed the regulator was not in Richard's mouth. He signaled to Carol to ascend, and Nigel, along with Richard, would ascend seconds later, but it was too late. Nigel would immediately shout for help, and after being picked up by a rescue boat, Richard would be resuscitated by paramedics and taken by ambulance to the hospital. 5 hours later, Richard would be pronounced dead. After the accident, Nigel and his wife Della would move on with their lives, at least as best they could. But in September of 2020, 4 long years after the accident, Nigel would receive a letter informing him that he would be prosecuted for gross negligence manslaughter. Nigel would state that he was knocked backwards. He didn't know what was going on. The prosecution would base their case on the idea that Nigel had held his unwilling student underwater and the misguided belief that a safety stop was more important than preventing him drowning. It was conceded during the trial that there were no issues with the planning and execution up until the final 5 meters. Dive computer records submitted as evidence would show that Richard had misreported his air supply by as much as 30 bars during the first air check. And the biggest defense for Nigel was that while expert divers were testifying, they would state, "I have been on both ends of the octopus, and I know of no instructor who would skip a safety stop after a 30-meter dive with an adequate supply of air available." The prosecution would switch gears and argue that Nigel controlled Richard's buoyancy to keep him underwater while he drowned.
Okay. Let's I don't know.
A lot to unwind here.
Yeah, I don't know how much is left of the video, but yeah, there's a lot to unwind. So one of the last comments that he made is like, during the trial, they asked expert divers if instructors should skip the last stop, after a 30-meter dive, and they all said no. But that is under non-emergency situations. If you have an emergency where your student or your body or your whoever is drowning, or feeling like they're drowning or whatever, they don't have the regulator in their mouth. I don't care that you think that, oh, I have air, my regulator works, I wonder what's happening. Who cares? The guy doesn't have a regulator in his mouth. Let it go. Either let him go if you want to stop and do your safety because you think you need it, or go to the surface with them.
Well, yeah. This is one of those situations where the instructor has to really be aware of exactly what is going on with their student.
Yeah.
And it sounds like to me that this instructor did not realize he did not have that regulator in his mouth and that he wasn't breathing. I don't believe he intentionally would have held him underwater knowing that the guy was not breathing anymore and potentially sucking water in and bolting for the surface. A standard practice, in fact, we do practice it, is to prevent a panicking student from bolting to the surface.
That's true.
It's in the rescue class.
Yep.
Most rescue classes, you're going to do a drill where the student pretends to be panicking and making a beeline for the surface. What are you going to do to keep them from bolting to the surface and basically having an air embolism?
Correct.
Because you're going to die if you have an air embolism. So this is really tricky. Was it grossly negligent that he didn't notice that his student didn't have a regulator in their mouth? I'm asking a question. I'm not making a definitive claim here. Obviously, we have a jury that could not decide. This is really tricky.
Yeah.
Right? So I think this instructor's intentions were, wait, don't panic. You have a regulator in your mouth and you're breathing and you're fine. You just got back from 115 feet. Let's finish. I have tons of air and you're breathing off of my tank.
Right. And that's why you don't name what you breathe, right? That's part of...
That's why.
Yeah.
So that's why I said there's a lot to unwind. Should he have noticed, wait, I have a student that has nothing in their mouth, or the hose ripped off, or whatever the facts are here.
Well, they haven't said all the facts in terms of like what was donated and all of that. I was hoping that was the case, because what happens is, and he mentioned the word octopus. They've been on both ends of the octopus. What that means, for those of you who are not divers, or perhaps some divers watching this don't really understand what it means. Octopus is what we call our secondary regulator that we use in case of emergencies. Now, people teach the use of octopus in different ways. I personally, the way I teach it and I practice it myself is that I donate what I breathe, then I switch to my octopus. I use the emergency one. What I've noticed in the real world is that people are taught to donate the octopus, and on top of that, their octopus is the absolute cheapest garbage they can find at their shop or on Amazon or whatever. Like, if you can find a regulator that somebody threw on the trash and you're like, I can use this, they would use that as an octopus. So by you donating your primary, I know that I'm going to be going to this thing, so I want to make sure this thing breathes awesome, as good as my primary. So what they didn't say is, and I still don't understand why the dive buddy, Katrina, whatever her name was, I don't remember, why was she the one sharing air? It should be the instructor. And when you're sharing air with somebody who's telling you they're out of air, you're holding on to them. You're looking at their face. Hey, I got you. So missing that the regulator was in the mouth is very, very hard if you're face to face. Now, I do understand when they're bolting.
They bolted, you may not have seen.
When they're bolting, you're holding them by the legs or whatever.
And
you may
on the
you may
way
miss
up,
it.
during the bolt,
Yeah.
he may have pulled it out of his mouth.
Correct.
And that's when the problem occurred. We don't know, but these
Yeah.
are really the things that we have to be. That I'm sure this jury was trying to figure out.
But to finish my thought about the octopus, being on both ends of the octopus means being on the receiving end, like I ran out of air, give me your octopus, and the providing end. So like somebody ran out of air, I'm donating my octopus. But again, I think a better practice is donate what you breathe, because you've been using that the whole dive. You know it works. You know the air is safe. Donate that. And, you know, I mentioned Inner Space Explorers earlier. One of the things I learned by going through that training is when you do it with Achim as an exercise, he will donate and make sure you're okay before putting the regulator in his mouth. It's like his priority is not let me breathe, because I was just breathing. I can hold my breath for 30 seconds or a minute or whatever. Donate, hold on to you. Are you okay? We're all good. Now let me breathe. That takes 10 seconds. You can hold your breath as the donor for 10 seconds or whatever. So he makes sure you're okay. You have air. Are we good? Now I'm going to breathe. So
But this was dismissed due to Carol being by Nigel's side, and seen as utterly ridiculous that a dive master would sit back and let that happen. During the trial, a former military diver would state that he had encountered a situation similar to Richard's in a previous case. A diver signaling out of air when they still have a working supply is a recognized sign of immersion pulmonary edema, a condition where the lungs spontaneously fill with fluid upon immersion in cold water, and if untreated, eventually causes the diver to asphyxiate. Even in 2016, very few people knew anything about it, and to this day, information is just now being implemented into training. Eventually, after 2 days of deliberation, Nigel would be found not guilty, but the damage was done. After 20 years and hundreds of dives, Nigel would lose his sole source of income as he could not cope with working as an instructor any longer. Nigel would state, "I will never teach again. I would like to dive again, probably not in this country." The local dive community not only lost one of their members, but they would also lose one of the most experienced and respected dive instructors. Many believe that Nigel Craig should have never been prosecuted, and that he was not responsible for the death of a student. But the simple truth is that if Richard had never died, it is still possible we may not fully understand IPO. Today, Nigel just wants his story out there, with the hope that more accidents that may involve IPO just may be prevented and lives can be saved.
Okay, so I'll just say this now that the video is over. He said, let's assume this is true, that Nigel wants his story out there. One of the downsides of reacting to these videos without watching it first is that I'm unable to reach out to people and see if they want to be on the show. But I'll say this, if Nigel is watching this, we would love to have him on the show and talk about this.
Definitely.
Because if you compare this to the incident with Linnea Mills and Debbie Snow, the instructor,
No comparison.
no comparison.
That's what I'll say.
Like, it was, everything she did was wrong from beginning to end. Everything was like safety third, who cares? And Linnea ended up dying because of it. So it was criminal negligence, easy to see, in my opinion. Let me just add that, okay? Because I don't want any trouble. But for this one, with Nigel, at least based on the information in the video, which again, we're taking that at face value without researching. So please don't comment below like, guys are idiots, you should have read about this before. How come you don't know all the details? We don't. We react blindly to these videos. I don't know how many times we have to prove that. It all seems that Nigel did a good job. He did all his dives. The last dive was on the last day on Sunday. He was going to go deep at that point. He was holding his student to prevent him from bolting to the surface. Like, he seemed like he was doing everything right, but yet Richard ended up dying because of it. So we would love to have Nigel and talk about this.
And I'm also glad, though, that a jury of his peers were able to understand the procedures of diving. They probably weren't divers, and did not find him guilty, that he in fact, did what a reasonable person would have done. That's probably what they had to determine in this situation. And that's probably very scary for him, knowing that you're going to have to now, in front of people that know nothing about diving, prove that you weren't criminally negligent and killed this guy who died under your watch. Can you imagine? You're just like, I hope they're going to understand this. I hope they can understand the standards. I'm sure they went through all the diving standards. You can imagine in a trial they went through everything and had to learn a lot. And boy,
I mean,
he's probably very relieved,
thankful.
But both thankful and has a bit of respect for the jury system, that they took their time and figured it out. Absolutely. It cost him his career, but I think that may have been his choice.
Yeah.
But I mean, anybody would be severely shaken up and say, you know what? I don't want to teach anymore, because even when I followed procedures, even when I did reasonable things, I wasn't convicted, but I was prosecuted. And man, that's really scary.
Yeah. It is scary. And I mean, to be fair, after we learned that Debbie Snow got out of that without even a single parking ticket,
I know.
Then, I mean, you would have to show me a video of somebody with a machete murdering somebody underwater for me to be like, okay, that guy needs to go to jail. Like, it's that bad. So, we don't know all the details. I wish Nigel would join us in the conversation, because I would love to ask him some questions about this, about what happened. But I think part of it is the fact that we need to make training realistic. We need to make training based on what you're going to find underwater. Let's go to 35 meters and do a quick navigation exercise, and let's go and do the stops and all of that. And actually, a few weeks ago, I got a video about someone reached out to us and said, can you guys expose this instructor who's violating standards during training? And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Let's watch that video and see. Now, it's a longer video. This was filmed. Apparently, the person who reached out to me, I guess they were probably the dive master on the dive or something like that, and they filmed this whole video. I just got a quick minute out of the video so you can see what's happening, and I want to talk about it. And for those of you who don't want to talk about diving, even though this is Dive Talk, you can just tune in. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week, because this is going to be a conversation about what should scuba training look like. And to be fair, once I watched this video, I reached out to the instructor, because I know the instructor, and you know him too. And I asked, like, dude, what is this about? Why are you doing this? And he said, well, to be fair, I'm not violating standards because this wasn't a training class. This was just an exercise I was doing with one of my dive masters, and somebody's trying to like throw dirt on my name saying that this was a class that I was teaching. It wasn't. It was just being done. But the question is, even if we take out the whole concept of this is a class and it's not a class, is it violating standards or is not? In my opinion, and I know I'm going to get murdered in the comments for this, it just looks pretty dumb. It looks pretty dumb because this doesn't reassemble real life. And I think that you should, as an instructor, focus on the real world, perhaps focus on the worst case scenario, like when we do classes that are about deep diving, you bail out on a rebreather at the deepest, furthest point of your dive. That's realistic. That's more than realistic, because more than likely, if you have a failure, it won't be at the absolute worst possible time. But during the class, you bail out from the worst possible time. But to go from there and say, well, not only you're going to bail out from the worst possible time, but now you have a shackle. You can't move your legs, and you're blind, and your right arm doesn't work.
What?
Like, why though? Like,
I
why would you?
haven't seen what you're talking about. No,
I know.
That's terrible.
But this is the kind of exercise.
When would you ever?
It's
have
dumb.
that? Oh.
That's what I'm saying. This is the kind of exercise that I just don't understand. And again, I know that in the comments you're going to be like, oh, you're an idiot. Like, you don't know. You're a better diver than me.
I mean, the only thing I can think about on that is
simple.
if somebody's trying to determine if somebody would panic in like a military training situation.
Right.
For the Navy SEALs, I do think they try
That's
to put
different.
them in stress.
Absolutely.
And see, how are you going to react? Are you going to be able to hold up?
Navy SEALs, sure.
I mean, I know it's shocking. You and I don't do Navy SEAL training. I didn't know. I just learned that you weren't
Breaking
a Navy SEAL.
news.
Yeah, I'm shocked. I mean, your biceps look like you may have
Am I?
been. Yeah, that's solid. Pickleball's working. But what in all seriousness though, think about it. So I don't want to say that that's never the type of training you should do. It's not the type of training that we do, because we train recreational divers and technical divers that aren't training to be in warfare.
Correct. All right, so let's watch this one because I want your thoughts on it. So again, this is just a minute of like a longer video.
Cool, you found. Okay.
All right, so this guy's just following the line, ripping the mask,
Oh man, yeah.
hitting him in the head and the sides, shaking him around,
Why?
pushing him, ripping off the regulator. All right, he's switching to the second one, moving him to, like, why though? Like, what kind of situation is this mimicking?
Again, maybe I'm gonna wait, but
It's
are
a minute
you trying
of this.
to
It was actually 5 minutes of
determine if this dive master candidate will panic under
what? Like, what is this?
It doesn't make sense. He knows that you're doing this. He knows he's controlled.
Okay, so that
I
was
don't
an
get it.
interesting
I don't
one.
get it.
That was an interesting one. I don't know if you saw it. I'm going to rewind for a second. If you notice, the line
get
gets
it.
tangled in the tank, which is a realistic potential situation, but then the instructor releases it.
Right. Now that's
So what are you doing?
Good point.
What's the
You're
point?
so right. That's the only realistic.
Right?
Oh, you
I
know
want to
what?
go back for a second.
No, that is the only realistic thing that could have happened.
Right. Okay, he got tangled. Let's see how he gets out of it. But no, you released him?
That is hilarious. Guys, that's actually a really good point.
What are you
That
doing?
was the moment that you should have tested him.
So here we go. Boom. Ripped out of his mouth. Oh, yeah. He can switch to his backup.
But
No
all that
problem.
is just silly. Yeah. I mean,
So look, tapping him in the head, messing with his
What?
mask, pushing him. At some point, he's like, dude, just get to the end of the line. That's what I want. So in the original video, like that's basically it. But that's just a repeat. So I'm gonna stop it there.
But it wasn't. I gotta say, I'm
Yeah.
gonna take the other side a little bit. He didn't overdo it. I mean, he didn't like we've seen videos. Remember that one where we watched the instructor
Yeah, that
literally
was
beat
dumb.
the crap out of his people underwater in a rescue class? I thought the guy was gonna kill them.
Yeah.
He didn't take it to that level.
Right.
But-
On that one, he was ripping the weights out of the
Oh.
pockets, taking the tank
Violent.
off the tank strap, but like so unrealistic. Like this would never happen in a real dive. Never.
Except for the moment that the back of the first stage got tangled in the line. That happens all the time.
That does
That-
happen.
and
So let him deal with it.
I know.
Let that,
That's a
the,
really good
the only
observation.
realistic part he didn't let the guy get out of. So anyway, so the
Interesting.
original video was like 5 minutes of the same thing. The guy's just going up and down the line. He gets more violent, but it's the same. He's pushing him like multiple times, just shaking him, ripping the mask, ripping the regulator. The guy puts his regulator, his mask, rip him again. Like, bro.
We've done some pretty intense training, you and I, together
Yeah.
with what some would say is certainly one of the greatest technical instructors. You have to say is definitely one of them, which is Ed Sorensen.
Yeah.
And it's hard. I've never seen Ed in our very difficult training, DPV cave dive training.
Yeah.
start brutalizing us like that during the training. Now,
Yeah.
Yes, we have to tow each other out. We have to stay neutral. We have to deal with I may panic, and how do you, because I'm, handing you a regulator, and so I'm blocking you as I do all those things,
Yeah.
but never like this violent stuff.
No, he did almost give me a concussion. I will say that with Ed.
Probably an accident.
No.
let's be honest.
No. It was on purpose, but I deserved it. I deserved it
Really?
because what we were learning was we were learning how to exit the cave blind with a DPV.
Oh, you didn't put your hand up?
Correct. So you're on the line, right? Like you saw the guy
He's
doing.
big on that one.
And you're supposed to protect your head.
Yes.
You're going out and protect your head. I wasn't. My hand was probably low.
Popped you?
He would just put his DPV on the way.
Okay,
Like
that's realistic.
Like a rock. He wasn't moving and hitting me on purpose. He would just park and put his DPV on the way for
That's
me to hit it. So I will be in just bang in the head. And I'm like, damn it.
And guess what? It's very realistic.
Very realistic.
Have you hit your head in a cave?
Well,
Come on. How many times are we glad we are wearing our helmets?
Thousands.
We like pink scrape.
yeah.
And
because
I
you're blind.
know, you should never. That means you weren't
You don't know what you're
perfect.
doing.
Okay, well, I'm going to wear my helmet that
Yeah.
has a million scrapes on it.
You're better than me. But what I'm saying is,
That's realistic. What
I got
did.
hit. I got hit twice. Okay, during that training, bang in the head. Damn it! Put my hand up, maybe lower a little over time. Bang in the head again.
Could happen.
Never happened again. My hand
That
was up
hand is it worked.
every time. So it's a way to learn. But again, Ed didn't make it like he wasn't seeking out like
Right.
we're gonna go in there and I'm gonna beat you up to see if you lose your cool or if you get panicked or whatever. No, he was giving us realistic scenario. I'm all for realism, just not unreal. Let's just make it so you have 5 failures at the same time, unrecoverable, just to see if you panic. That has no value in my opinion. I told this guy, I'm not going to mention any names because this is not about ruining people's careers here. I told this guy, I don't get it. I don't see the purpose. Whether this was training or not, standards violations or not, I don't see it. Don't get the value. He's an instructor. He has more experience than me. He's probably a much better diver than me too. So he knows what he's doing. But personally, I didn't get it. He tried to explain to me. I still didn't get it. So I'm not going to condone that kind of training, exercise, however you want to call it. Just like I'm also not going to ever get over the fact that Debbie Snow did not even get a single ticket for what she did. And we were fortunate enough to have Bob here in our studio,
What
to
an
have
episode.
Lisa, Linnea's mom,
Remember
in our
how-
studio.
Man, that was probably the most emotional episode
Absolutely.
we've ever done. I mean, there were moments where I was just
It was two episodes.
really holding on.
Yeah.
It was tough to hear.
Heartbreaking. And in case you haven't seen it, I'm going to leave it right here so you can go and learn from it. I think we all learned something from that. And yeah, just unbelievable
Definitely.
did that happen. But clergy,
Bye, everybody.
now everybody knows. Don't hold your car like that.
I'm
That's
proud of it, and I would like you to start respecting me more. I have a black card.